Good morning and welcome to this week's live IGTV. My name is Allie Payne. Today I'm talking about boundaries versus expectations. And please can someone tell me the difference, because no matter what you try with your teen, disconnection, more defiance, more conflict, it's just getting worse. What I want you to know is you are not alone in this struggle. This is probably one of the most critical things, relationship things to understand, and it is probably one of the most misunderstood because we are never taught these things. There is no parenting class to understand this. There's no relationship class in high school to understand this. And we only know what we learned from, what you learned from your parents. And your parents are not bad or evil because nobody told them either. So I think today, that's not centered. I can't do that. I'm too anal. Let's create the understanding and clarity that you need so that you can be calmer, increase connection, and influence, not control, with your teenager. Does that sound good? Because if that's what you're looking for, that's what today's going to be about. All right, my name is, again, Allie Payne. I'm a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach. I've been working with parents of teens for the last 15 years to help them end the painful disconnection, emotional blow-ups, and stressful silences to build relationships based on trust and respect. And boundaries and expectations are probably the number one way to do that. If we understand what they actually are, not what we were taught that they are. Okay, Muggleborn, good to see you. All right, if you're watching on Instagram, give me a follow. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I promise this is going to be worth your time. And this will remain on my Instagram profile and on YouTube so that you don't need to take all the notes. You can actually just watch and rewatch until you get what you need from this. I'm going to give you specific scripts that you can use with your teenager as well. All right, let's jump in. First of all, we need to clearly define what a boundary is and what a boundary isn't, what an expectation is and what it isn't, to help you to see how the two got muddled up in the first place. And none of it is because it has anything to do with your intelligence, because you're wildly intelligent. Nothing has to do with your capability as a parent, because you're an incredibly courageous and caring parent. I know, because you're here. You're listening to this. So let's just remove any of that judgment, fault, or blame. Let's remove that from your parents who did the best they could with even less information. Let's remove that too, okay? Hi, George. All right. An expectation is probably how you were raised, believing that was a boundary. Because that's what our parents were taught, okay? So an expectations are about behavior. Boundaries are about the emotions that drive the behavior, okay? So expectations are a top-down tool that address the behavior strictly. No emotions. They address the behavior. Boundaries are a bottom-up tool that work with the emotion first to then direct the behavior. The reason that boundaries work scientifically is because all behavior is driven by emotion. All behavior is driven by emotion. It is why the expectation model of the top down tends to be fruitless in your relationships, period, but specifically in your relationship with your teen. Okay? Now, expectations are necessary in our world. Yeah, this is marriage counseling too, so welcome. Come on in. Thanks for saying that. Expectations are necessary in our world. We have expectations in the legal system, behavioral norms that are required for us to have some form of safety and order in our world. For instance, stopping at a stop sign so you don't run over a pedestrian, stopping at a red light so you don't T-bone another driver. Those are behavioral expectations laid out for us within either the law or strong cultural behavioral norms based on where you currently live, because everyone has different cultural behavioral norms, okay? So expectations are good when they are used in context. Expectations are important in places of work. That's why when you are hired, you get an employee manual, like that employee handbook that clearly state the behavioral norms of that particular business, that as an employee of that business, you are expected to behave and operate within so that they can maintain the business that they're building, okay? So expectations they have a place, they are good, they are real. Your teenager is not your employee. Even if you believe you are the boss of your teenager is not your employee. Especially the reason that expectations are good and your teenager will learn about expectations from you, but not be open to learning them if you only address the top-down model of expectations, which deal only with behavior, because it ignores the science that all behavior is driven by emotion. And the reason that distinction between expectations and boundaries is so important is because in the adolescent brain, during the second and one of the most critical growth phases, the second last and most critical growth phase in the human brain, your teenager is more emotionally reactive, more emotionally sensitive than ever, than perhaps when they were a toddler. Teens and toddler brains is when that growth phase is happening. So if you are attempting to use top-down behavior modification expectations with a brain that lacks impulse regulation, emotional control, a critical analysis, decision-making, and is run and operated more by a relatively raw amygdala because it is not fully formed in the intellectual functioning, is not fully formed in their brain, you are choosing to ignore the proven science of how your teenager's brain needs to be addressed during these years. Does it mean that they are going to be a failure as an employee because you have never taught them expectations? Oh, hell no. I hope you listen until the end. It means that addressing them from a bottom-up emotional perspective, from boundaries, is the way that you teach, relate to, have influence with, not over, and relate to that brain so that they can hear you and learn about behavior. A top-down expectation model works for adult brains for emotional regulation. And again, it works with employees in courts of law, etc. Your teenager brain is not at that place yet. They'll get there. Okay, so if you were like me, you were raised believing that expectations meant the same thing as a boundary. Would you agree? You were raised believing that an expectation was the same thing as a boundary, that an expectation about what behavior is good, bad, right, wrong, pleasing, not pleasing, was how you were raised. I want to tell you, your parents are good people, and that is not true. It is wildly untrue. Okay? If you were like me, you were raised in an environment where you were required to deny, suppress, or abandon your own feelings, beliefs, and values, to behave in a way that was pleasing to and reflected the values and beliefs of your parents or the elders around you, to have them feel more significant, less insecure, and abate their fear to earn their love and approval, to be deemed a valuable human, to be enough, to be lovable. That is an expectation. Expectations are transactional. When you do this, I will do this. It is behavioralist thinking, okay? So let me give you the definition, my definition again, of an expectation, the shorter version. An expectation is a projection of the experience I want to feel, like a good parent. I want to feel secure. I don't want to feel fearful and out of control. So I am going to project my experience on you and require you to deny and suppress and abandon yourself, to behave in a way that reflects what I value and what I believe, so that I feel safe and worthy as a human being. So I am requiring you to caretake my emotions and reflect what I believe is true and right in the world, so I feel safe. That is how an expectation works in a relationship in an unhealthy way. As I said before, expectations are necessary in the world. They are behavioral and they are necessary. However, in the way, again, you and I were raised, where these expectations and boundaries, which are not the same thing, got all like mixed up in a quagmire soup of unhealthy relational tools, that is how an expectation shows up. So your teenager feels controlled. They feel as though that they need to constantly give up who they are to please you, to earn your love, because if they do this, then you feel this. If they make you look like a good parent, then you're happy. If they are responsible for your feelings and don't make you angry, or if I wouldn't feel this way if you didn't do this, that is unhealthy. That is codependence. It is toxic. And I understand, by the way, that is about 80% of our generation and how we were raised. Again, because no one taught our parents either. So I hope that is clear for you. An expectation is great and necessary. It is a behavioral top-down model that is necessary in our world in very necessary situations. It is not a healthy relational tool. It is a behavioral tool. A relational tool is a bottom-up emotional tool, which is a boundary. So let me define for you what a boundary is. I love this quote from Brené Brown, Dr. Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart book. It is a quote by I'm losing my language. It's a quote by Prentice Hemphill, and it says, "Boundaries are the place in which I simultaneously love and respect myself and you." So boundaries are an emotional tool because they acknowledge that all behavior is driven by emotions. 100% of behavior is driven by emotions. So boundaries address that, come at the relationship from the emotional place. They are not about, thank you, Dr. Lockhart. So boundaries are not about control as much as they are about maintaining a level of influence. Boundaries are not about abdicating your authority and trying to become your teenager's best friend, which is what I get ripped a new one for all the time on social media. Boundaries are the most powerful form of relational connection because they build respect, connection, compassion, clarity, and understanding. Expectations are used to control, at least you think, to try and control your teenager's behavior, but ignore where that behavior comes from. They are used when you feel emotionally unregulated. Oh my gosh, Dr. Lockhart, thank you so much. She just said that she supported this message, by the way, and if you don't follow Dr. Anne Louise Lockhart, you need to. Expectations are used in parenting as an unhealthy tool to attempt to control your child or your teenager's behavior when you feel unregulated or unsafe. And that is okay. That's not a judgment. As a parent, oh my goodness, hi, welcome to the world of feeling unregulated and unsafe. Like, it's like crazy all the time. But because you and I weren't raised with that place of feeling out of control being, or messy, being okay, and being a place that we can swim in and be vulnerable and uncomfortable, and that's okay, you probably try and lock that shit down with some expectations, and that's what doesn't work. So let me come at this from boundaries again. A boundary is an emotional currency at a relational level. A boundary is an emotional currency at a relational level, and that's why they're so powerful and they work. It does not mean that you don't have authority, but boundaries were never intended to be used for control. But you see, because we didn't get any of this defining, it just got all messed up. Boundaries express what you feel respected by and what you feel safe with. Boundaries are not about excess, authority, power over, or control. Boundaries are about power with, power in. They are somewhat collaborative. There is a negotiation there. Now, when I say collaborative and negotiation, and you just think, oh, well, see, now you're trying to be your teenager's bestie again. No, then this is for you. Please keep listening. So let me use a boundary. A boundary is where you have a hard line about whether you feel respected or not. An expectation is whether or not you feel in control. And it's not your teenager's fault if you don't feel in control. That is your work to do for you. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy. I've done years of it myself. I have struggled enormously with that. Coming from a perfectionistic, ultimate authority family of origin, I have struggled a lot with that. Boundaries are about having authority in a relational way. So let me get into some examples here. So let's talk about I get parents who tell me, well, you say all the time, you shouldn't have expectations of your teenager. You shouldn't have expectations. So I let the expectation go and now they're like running all over me. Okay. That's not what I'm sorry if that's what you heard. That is not at all what I meant. Again, expectations do not work as a relational tool. So let's talk about school avoidance, shall we? Because that is a really hot topic right now. So I get parents who say all the time, my teenager needs to at least get C's. Like, you've got to have a C or a B average or you're going to lose privileges. That, my friend, is an expectation. You are requiring a certain external performance marker of your teenager so you can fill the narrative of your story to be a good parent. You are requiring your teenager to behave in a way that has you feel safe. And likely avoid parent shaming, because that's an Olympic sport. You are requiring your teenager to behave in a way where you can feel good about having raised a good child. That is an expectation. It's filling a story that you were likely given as a child, that I promise you will build more disconnection, disrespect, and defiance in your household. Because what your teenager hears, I'm not saying this is what you intend at all, but what your teenager hears is, oh, so you only love me when I get good grades. So if I don't get good grades, I'm embarrassing to you. And you need to punish me for not being the way that you need me to be to feel good about you. This is where your wounding as a child may be showing up. Not because your parents are bad people. I cannot say that enough. Okay? This takes a great deal of courage and ownership. So if you say to me, oh, I don't expect my teenager to get those kind of grades. I don't ask for any grades. But my line is they have to try their best. I mean, they have to at least try their best, and then I'm good. Okay. And what if your teenager is struggling with mental health issues? Trying their best is your external judgment based on your current mental health, your current capacity, and your currently adult developed brain, none of which your teenager has. Who are you to judge if they are doing their best? I had a conversation with a parent, gorgeous, caring parent last night, and I said, your teenager is using marijuana to calm anxiety. They are self-harming to try and cope with overwhelming emotions they don't know how to deal with. They are doing their best. Their best is just coping right now. Their best is just coping. And I said to him, if you were home and off work on a sabbatical because your mental health was not well, and I looked at you one day and said, oh my gosh, well, you're not exactly doing your best, how would you feel? Who am I to judge what is your best when I am not in your brain? And again, you are purely making a criticism and a judgment based on what you see about my behavior without consideration, empathy, or compassion for the emotions that I am currently dealing with that I probably don't feel safe enough to share with you. So let's be careful, because you see, an expectation says, this is another definition of an expectation. I need you to behave in a way that reflects my values and my beliefs with a sense of urgency. And if you don't, you will be met with criticism and judgment. Not understanding, not compassion, not empathy, because all I want is you to behave in a way that works for me. That is behavioral thinking. That is an expectation. And that's why it doesn't work in a relationship. And it most certainly does not work when you are dealing with a teenager who is struggling with mental health concerns, mental health issues. Okay? So when you're saying, I just need them to try their best, and then you are grounding them or creating consequences because they are not trying their best, I have news for you. They are trying their best. And if they are defying or not caring about school, it is because they don't feel seen and heard for what is true for them. They feel as though you don't care who they are. You only care what they do and how that makes you look or how that makes you feel. So if they don't care about school, your teenager, apathy is a coping strategy. Please don't kid yourself. Apathy is a coping strategy, because when your teenager doesn't try and fails it hurts just slightly less than trying and failing and having that message of you are a failure being true. I know because I was that teen. I went from straight A's, award-winning athlete and student, to failing out, F's, and a suicide attempt. You cannot motivate them, so stop. You can care about them. Start there. Let's talk about expectations around a curfew. You need to be home by 11 o'clock. That's it. You need to be home by 11 o'clock. That's fine to set a curfew. Nothing wrong with that. Let's say your teenager calls you at 10:30 and says, after the movie, we went to this movie, it's over at 10:30. Now, we're all wondering if we could go to the IHOP. Like, it's at this location, like your teenager's telling you where they are. And so we're together, we're inside a building, we're safe. We really want to go and hang out at the IHOP and kind of like talk about the movie. Could I stay out an extra half an hour and we'll be home at 11:30? And you say, no, I said 11 o'clock. That is control. That is not care. That is control. What would be the problem of saying, yeah, I really want you to connect with your friends and I know you're safe. I know where you are. Thank you for telling me where you are. For sure, I'll come get you at 11:30. That is a boundary because you are dealing in an emotional language, wanting them to connect with their friends. They've told you where they are. They're doing something safe. And so this is where the curfew thing comes in. Now, how would you set a boundary around a curfew? So expectations are hard, fast rules about control that don't work because your teenager will constantly say, you don't care who I am, you only care what I do or what I do that makes you, how that makes you feel. Your teenager's not responsible for your feelings. You were never responsible for your parents' feelings either. Even if that's how you were raised. And again, this is not against your parents. I'm telling you this now. This is your work, not your parents' work. This is your work. Your teenager is not responsible for your feelings, and trying to use top-down behavioral thinking of expectations to try to control them so you can feel emotionally regulated, a sense of influence, not afraid or secure about who you are as a parent is not your teenager's problem. A boundary is where you probably have a hard line. See, here's the thing. Expectations are about control. Boundaries are about respect. So if you're not sure, some things can be both. Some things can absolutely be both. So for instance, my teenager coming in and like doing graffiti all over their bedroom wall. Let's just say they're doing graffiti all over their bedroom wall. I feel disrespected, and that's a giant hell no. And I am going to communicate that in a way that's vulnerable and emotional language, and I'm going to get them to repaint that wall, and they are going to pay for that paint. That would be a natural consequence, and I have an expectation that if you live in this house, you do not paint my walls unless you ask my permission first. That's a hell yeah. So some boundaries can be expectations as well, and that is why this can be really difficult, is that some can be both. Okay? So but let's start with a boundary of respect. You have a line. This is where I feel respected. Now, for most of us, based on how you were raised, your line is also about feeling in control. Not that I know personally, I'm just saying. Your line is probably also about feeling in control. So here's what I'm going to ask you. What is your actual place where you feel respected? Separate where you feel in control. That's an expectation. What do you actually need from your teenager to feel respected? Not for them to be responsible for your feelings, not to fill your narrative of being a good parent or them being a good child, because that's just ridiculous labeling and judgment that doesn't work. Where is your hard line? Now, let's use this relative to, I'm going to use this relative to curfews and vaping. This is a big thing. I have a boundary that you don't vape in our house. That is totally, totally fine. A lot of teenagers are vaping in their rooms. I just got a message from another parent this morning. This teenager is vaping in his room. The smell was ridiculous. Now, if you asked me if your thought right now What's the consequence for that? You probably are using expectation thinking, control, compliance, obeying, criticism, judgment, condemnation. That is expectation thinking. If your teenager is smoking weed, there's probably a reason why. So when you're focusing on what your teenager's doing, that's behavioral. When you are willing to get down into the messiness of why they might be doing what they're doing, that is a boundary. That's coming at that from all emotions drive behavior. That's the scientific research. Okay, we're not going to pretend. Stop trying to fight science. Why is your teenager smoking weed? Create understanding first. Get curious. Be compassionate. Have a conversation. Are they anxious, overwhelmed, depressed? Whether that is a physiological anxiety or depression, it is situational. I don't know. I have not diagnosed them. But when you get curious and ask, then you can get to, okay, would you be open to going to a medical professional so that we can get you help? I care about your emotions, your mental health, and I want you to get the help that you need. So let's go do that. That's first. Second is, they say to you, which many teens say, well, I can't sleep unless I smoke my vape, my THC, my CBD, whatever it is. I'm using it because I can't sleep. And teenagers already have a hard time sleeping. I can't sleep unless I use it. And so control would be, expectation would be, well, you're not using it in this house. We're not having that. And I understand you would want to say that. Oh, that's yes. I understand you would want to say that for every reason. Yes. And I'm going to tell you it doesn't work. Because you are missing again that all behavior is driven by emotion. So if you go to instead, a boundary is, how can I find the middle ground where I feel respected and loved and safe, and you feel respected and loved and safe? And sometimes that middle ground is still a gap. There's no it's not like this happy, let's go meet in the middle, tie it off with a bow. That's not how it happens. This takes work, consistent conversation frequently. What if you said to your teen, okay, I am really uncomfortable about having that in our house. The smell, number one. Number two, it is illegal substance for someone of your age who does not have a letter from a doctor or whatever. Do not lecture. Do not go into the lecture. Stop right there. What if could you, until we find and get you the help that you need to help you to deal with these emotions or this challenge or struggle, whatever you're in, what if you use it in the garage? Could we make that agreement? So do you see how my line is not in your room, but there is a gray area prior to my line where I am willing to help to be part and model finding the middle ground where you feel loved, respected, and safe, and I feel loved, respected, and safe. And your teenager would say, all right, I think that's dumb. I mean, it's my room, but okay. Then you're like, okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I feel respected by that. And so they're not going to love it. That's a boundary. You see, a boundary is messy. A boundary is the antithesis of control, and yet is the only avenue to influence. So scientifically proven, from leadership studies, sales, parenting, all relationships of any kind, it is not your knowledge that maintains influence. It's not how much you know about whatever you know. It is not your authority that maintains influence. Doesn't work. It'll help, I guess. It is empathy. Okay, empathy, as in the degree in which I am willing to take your perspective. I am willing to listen without judgment, without criticism. I am willing to believe and attempt to take your perspective on any experience as you experienced it, not as I believe it to be true. That's a Dr. Brené Brown quote, not mine. That scientifically is what builds and maintains a relational influence over time. Sorry about the noise. I have an electrician here doing some work. So this is about maintaining that level of influence. And I am going to tell you that control is not influence. It's what you were taught was influence. Control, top-down behavioral expectations build defiance, disrespect, and a lot more conflict. Because you are ignoring the science that says all behavior is driven by emotion. And the reason it's uncomfortable to come at parenting this way is because it's messy. It's messy. So it messes with your head around feeling like you're in authority, around feeling like, are you doing this right? It's not cut and dried because it's a relationship. Those are messy. Because it's another human being who thinks and believes differently than you do. So it requires you to be in messy conversations to build understanding so that you understand what is it requiring for you to feel respected, what is it requiring for them to feel respected. And sometimes that gap is still this big, but you do your best. Okay, wow, that's loud. I'm really sorry about this, you guys. Okay, let's talk about a curfew and a boundary. Well, I'm sorry, I already did that. Let's talk about school. Let's talk about school avoidance and a boundary. Okay? First and foremost, here's what I want to say. If you've read any Gabor Mate books or his research, I strongly recommend it. Around mental health and the brain. The way that your teenager performs at school does not and will not ever make you a good or bad parent. The way that your teenager externally performs at school does not make them a good or bad child. Okay? The way that your teenager performs at school is a function of a number of things. Number one, their internal sense of worth and value as a human being is being reflected in their behavior. I'm telling you this because I know I was that teen. I went from straight A's to F's because I was so overwhelmed. I was terrified to ask for help because I was raised in a home where asking for help was deemed as horribly weak. So even though I was being told, well, just go ask for help. Just go ask for help. The teacher's right there. What's your problem? Just go ask for help. If I asked for help, that was like admitting that I was broken and weak and not good enough, which I already was terrified might be true. So why would I go ask for help? So unless you are normalizing struggle, your teenager, and unless you're normalizing the struggle and asking for help, your teenager's not going to go ask for help. So when it comes to a boundary around school, I'm going to tell you this. It is unrealistic for you to set one. Period. When you are setting a boundary around your teenager and school, you are kidding yourself. That is an expectation. It's an expectation. The only thing, the job that you have with your teenager and school is to ensure that they are happy and healthy. And if they don't care about school, or they aren't going to school, or they're failing everything, all behavior is driven by emotion. You have a bigger problem. I am dealing with parents whose children have been in school avoidance literally for 7 months. 7 months. They failed lots of things. And guess what? They did not burst into flames. And their parents did not die. And through that 7 months, I have helped these parents to let go of the focus of external performance and judgment on doing your best and pay attention to what's actually going on, which was mental health. And become their teenager's ally to say, I believe you. I trust that you know your body and your brain. Can you imagine if you were raised in an environment where your parents didn't give you a message that sounded like, oh my gosh, your feelings, you don't know how you're really feeling. This is what's important and you're going to suck it up and you're going to go do it. You don't know what you're thinking. You're not old enough to know what you're thinking. This is what you're going to go do because this is going to make me look good as a parent and you're going to do it no matter what. What if you were raised and someone said to you, I believe you, I trust you. How can I help you? That is what you need to say to your teen if they're in school avoidance, because there is nothing about school that's going to work with an expectation or you faking it that, oh no, it's a boundary. No, my friend, no. You have a mental health issue. And you're either going to be your teenager's ally and you're going to start listening and trusting them and supporting them and getting them the help they need, which I have in an article, 12 Steps to Back to School Success. It's all in there. Now, I'll tell you, these parents I'm working with over 7 months, they have, number one, had their teenagers now been diagnosed, some of them with significant anxiety, social anxiety, some of them with major depressive disorder. It has taken them 7 months to find the right therapist, because the first one is not the right one, generally, to find the right therapist for their child, not for you, but for their child. It has taken them 7 months to find the right medication, because sometimes medical intervention is required, whether temporary or long-term. That does not happen overnight. And now their child gets up and goes to school and has developed coping strategies and awareness of their brain, their body, not by denying it or ignoring it, awareness of their brain and body. They know what they need. These parents have learned to trust them and say, okay, I trust you. Let's do that, whatever that coping strategy is, for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And the more that parent has gotten beside them and let go of their insecurity about having to be in authority or in control, that teenager has succeeded and is now back at school. Yes, they failed stuff. Yes, they're going to have to make it up. But I'm going to ask you this, and I'm only going to ask you one time. What is more important to you? Your teenager graduating or their mental health? Because one of those two can wait. One of those two will be there forever, but one of them will not. And as a teenager who attempted suicide, I can't express that enough. And yes, I'm being serious about this because this matters. This is your teenager's life. So please stop faking it or telling yourself that complete falsehood that you're putting expectations around their grades or external performance, or no, I don't have expectations anymore. I just have boundaries. No, you don't. No, you don't. It's still an expectation. Now, I'm going to answer this one big question to wrap this up. When you use a boundary, you are teaching your teenager about emotional regulation, effective emotional awareness, emotional expression, self-advocacy, and healthy boundaries. So that when they get out in the world, do they understand behavioral expectations? Yes. They understand behavioral expectations as an employee within the global culture, the law. Yes, because they are emotionally regulated, they have learned respect. And as a daughter, a woman, a female in this world right now who grew up, like most of you, in a home that loved and cared about me and did their best with absolute authority and expectation, I did not know how to set boundaries. I did not know there was such a thing as a boundary. I dated people who had different agendas with me than I had and didn't know I had permission to say no. So if you think that doing giving up expectations as a way of behavior modification, because expectations, again, are necessary in the world. They are not a behavior modification tool in parenting. Stop it. Just imagine sending your teenager out into the world, and now they're starting to date, and they're drawn in by the bad person, the bad apple. If they don't know how to effectively express themselves, to self-advocate, to have permission and know how to set boundaries because you taught them, how do you think they're going to avoid that relationship? How do you think they're going to exit that relationship? Expectations in a parenting relationship do not express emotional safety, that they can bring their messiness to you and you love them regardless. Expectations do not express meaningful connection, where you and I can be in conversation and we can disagree and know that the relationship is not at risk, nor is our value, your value with me, more my value with you, is not at risk. We can disagree. That is meaningful connection. We can safely discuss ideas, beliefs, and passionately debate them. And we are not at risk in our relationship. Expectations do not convey, I just lost the last one, true belonging, where I only need and want you to be who you are, as I come alongside you as a mentor for you to be all of who you are and feel in this world. And I have no agenda of you abandoning, denying, or suppressing that to please me. Emotional safety, meaningful connection, and true belonging. Those are 3 of the 6 key factors studied and proven to keep your teenager from high risk taking behavior like drugs, sexual activity. They are also proven to not only increase academic performance by increasing attendance in academics longer, not straight A's, but just a commitment to learning. It also they are also markers that are studied for resilience, for teenagers who know that failure does not define their value and worth in this world, which expectations reinforce. That if they fail, it is an internalization and a mark on their character. Boundaries let them know, hell no, it's not. You just tried and it didn't work. All right, how can we try a different way? So it is a strength of character when you can build those 3 things. If you are looking for more information and trying to understand boundaries and expectations and how it leads to consequences, which I have not addressed in this video, because if you get boundaries right, you have the need for a lot less consequences. If you are driving hard on that expectations bus, you're going to be so fascinated by consequences and you will never be able to keep up with the number of them that are required. So if you find yourself in that boat where consequences are the only thing you spend your time thinking about, you're policing and monitoring these consequences because you got to make sure your teenager is performing in a way that you feel in control about so you don't need to feel fearful or insecure, that is not going to work. When you truly get boundaries right and you actually acknowledge and honor the science that proves that all behavior is driven by emotion and you use boundaries, you will need a lot less consequences. I have a program called Become a Boundaries Boss. You can message me on Instagram. I will give you a discount code for Become a Boundaries Boss. Just message me with Boundaries Boss. I will message you the discount code and the link to the program. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can send me an email, hello@alliepayne.com, or message me on Instagram. I will give you that code. I also have a private parenting group online where I spend most of my day. It is a smaller group. It is my priority, where I answer questions and constantly provide resources. It is a Facebook group. It is on Facebook. I also go live in there twice a month. So you get personalized answers to your questions, concerns, and challenges to help you create the relational shift faster. You don't have to go through modules. You don't have to go through like podcasts. You just jump in and I get you started. And if you're interested in that community, it's in the link in my bio under work with me, or message me, private community, and I'll get you the link and you can jump in there. In my private community, I'm going to be doing conversations starting this month and from now on with 30-year experienced pediatricians who are also mental health advocates, own mental health clinics, and are also substance use clinicians for adolescents. And I will be talking to them on May 13th and May 27th. I'm going to be dealing with eating disorders. I'm going to be doing that all in my private parenting community on Facebook. So if you're interested, message me or just hit the link in my bio, hit work with me, and you'll see my private community there. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. I hope this was valuable. I hope that you found this relevant and that it cleared up some of this quagmire of misunderstanding of expectations and boundaries to help you lower disrespect, conflict, and defiance in your relationship with your teen and build connection, trust, and respect. Thank you so much for being here. I wish you all a wonderful week, and I will see you next Thursday here at 11 a.m. Pacific, talking all about parenting teens. Bye.